On a rush-filled Monday morning in downtown Chicago, nobody really noticed the quiet presence of Maria. The building where she worked, the headquarters of Lincoln Enterprises, was always busy at that hour. Early in the lobby, people hurried past, each other with their minds set on meetings and tasks. Phones in hand, eyes fixed on screens. No one gave more than a brief glance to the woman in the burgundy uniform, moving with a kind of calmness that went unnoticed. While clacking shoes echoed on the polished floors, Maria steadily worked, her mop gliding back and forth as if she'd done this job 1,000 times, which in truth she almost had. To Maria, it was just another morning. She kept her head down, doing her job with the kind of quiet dedication that makes places like this run smoothly, even if no one ever says thank you. But as she worked near the elevators, something out of the ordinary happened. The CEO, David Turner, was on his way to an early strategy meeting, moving briskly across the marble and glancing through emails on his tablet. When the elevators chimed and the doors slid open, David paused, distracted by a sound that didn't quite fit the usual lobby noise. He heard Maria speaking softly but fluently in Russian to a visitor who seemed lost near the reception. She was providing directions with patience, switching between English and Russian as if it were the easiest thing in the world. Most people around her probably wouldn't have recognized what language she was using, but David had traveled enough to catch the familiar cadence. He stopped, surprised and curious. For a moment he forgot about his meeting, watching the interaction unfold. The sight of Maria, the woman in the burgundy uniform, usually invisible to most, helping someone in a way none of the busy office workers could have managed, shifted something in David. He felt like he was crossing an invisible boundary, stepping into a different side of daily life in this building. He realized, even if only for a second, that assumptions about people and their roles might not be what they seemed. David went up in the elevator, his mind suddenly awake to the idea that things in Lincoln Enterprises might just be about to change in ways nobody could predict. Driven by a mix of curiosity and a bit of disbelief, David drifted closer. He didn't make it obvious that he was watching, but he hung back near the coffee kiosk, pretending to scroll through his emails while really tuning in to what was happening just a few feet away. He saw Maria still talking with the Russian visitor, but it did not stop there. Moments later, a couple entered the lobby speaking rapid Spanish, looking flustered as they tried to find the conference rooms. Without missing a beat, Maria greeted them with a friendly "Buenos dias" and switched seamlessly into Spanish, explaining the building layout and giving directions. David found himself stunned as he listened. Maria's voice was calm and easy, shifting from one language to another as if she were changing shoes or coats. When another guest, glancing lost and overhearing Maria, asked a question in French, Maria greeted him with a bonjour and managed a brief yet clear answer. Before the guest smiled and hurried on, Maria made these little connections happen in an instant, quietly bridging the gaps that no one else in the lobby even seemed to notice. It struck David that what he was witnessing felt as natural to Maria as it was for everyone else to reach for their morning coffee. She smoothed over worries, helped people feel welcome, and kept the lobby moving, all without missing a single swipe of her mop. For years, David had always believed that people who made a real difference in Lincoln Enterprises were the ones with formal jobs, certifications, nameplates on their doors, and degrees from big universities. He had spent countless hours reviewing resumes and sitting in on endless interviews, always chasing after the next big credential, the shiniest diploma. But now he felt an odd mix of astonishment and embarrassment creep in. How was it possible that someone as sharp and useful as Maria had been there under his nose all along, yet had no official company email, no premium parking spot, not even a gold name badge like the senior managers wore? It stirred something new inside him, A realization that maybe, just maybe, the best prepared person in the building was the one everyone else looked straight past. David kept watching, unable to shake off the idea that his way of judging talent might not be the only way, or even the best way after all. David hesitated for a moment, feeling oddly nervous for a man so used to giving orders. The usual noise of the lobby faded as he made his way over to Maria, trying to keep his tone friendly and not too formal. When he reached her, he smiled and said, "You have an incredible way with people. I heard you speaking at least 3 different languages just now. If you don't mind me asking, how many languages do you actually speak?" Maria paused, not expecting anyone, let alone the CEO, to pay attention, much less start a conversation about her skills. She looked up, mop in hand, and answered with a hint of shyness, but no trace of boasting. 9. I read and speak 9 languages. I grew up moving between countries, so I picked them up along the way. She listed them quietly. English, Spanish, Russian, French, Polish, Ukrainian, Italian, Portuguese, and even a bit of Mandarin. Her words were straightforward, offered without a drop of arrogance or a need to impress. David stood there, a bit taken aback. All of a sudden, the way he looked at the bustling morning changed. All these years, Maria had blended right into the background, simply part of the daily routine, her burgundy uniform blending with the walls and the floors she kept spotless. Yet here she was, a living, breathing bridge between cultures, someone who could quietly connect worlds in an office that prided itself on international business, but often struggled with actual communication. The more David thought about it, the more uncomfortable he felt. He realized how limited his view had been, for so long, believing that real talent made itself visible with titles, credentials, and the right connections. Watching Maria, he found himself wondering what other gifts might be hiding in plain sight, around the office, overlooked only because no one had bothered to ask or simply to watch with a curious eye. He thanked Maria genuinely, not just for helping the visitors, but for showing him something he had missed about his own company. As he walked away, his mind kept spinning. What else was happening right under his nose? What other skills or stories were being wasted because no one had ever thought to look past a uniform or a job title? For the first time in a long while, David felt like he was the one being taught something important about the people working beside him every single day. David didn't want that moment to slip away or become just another forgotten detail in a long day, so he made a split-second decision. He turned to Maria and said, "Would you mind coming up to my office for a quick chat? I'd like to hear more about your story." His request stopped Maria in her tracks for a moment. She glanced around, unsure if he was speaking to her or someone else. No one had ever invited her to the executive suite before. The idea of walking past those guarded glass doors on the top floor, the ones she usually only dusted from the outside, made her nervous. With a nod, Maria agreed. As they headed to the elevator, she wiped her hands on her uniform and tried to slow her heartbeat. People in the lobby gave curious looks, some of them probably wondering what a cleaner could possibly be doing with the CEO at her side. When the elevator doors closed, silence filled the space. Maria barely dared to breathe. Even David, who spent most days with his head full of meetings and numbers, was strangely aware of the quiet, as if the little metal box were separating them from the usual rush of the office. Maria, seeking something to say to fill the silence, offered a piece of her story that surprised David. "I've been here a long time," she said softly. 13 years, actually. Most nights, some weekends too. You learn a lot when you're the last one in the building, but I guess nobody really noticed. As the numbers climbed floor by floor, Maria felt each light above the door was like a step she had never expected to take, one more level away from everything she had come to accept as her place. The ride to the top became more than a physical trip. It felt like she was crossing some invisible border, quietly daring to step into a world she had never thought was meant for her. David, meanwhile, listened to her words and reflected on how easily a whole company could overlook someone right in their midst. By the time the elevator chimed on the top floor, the distance between their roles seemed a little less wide, even if only for a minute. Maria stepped out, seeing the polished glass and high windows from a new angle, one she never imagined she would see, not as an outsider, but as someone invited in. David's office on the top floor was exactly how Maria imagined it would be, only even more elaborate. Maps of the world stretched across one wall, showing all the places where Lincoln Enterprises had set up shop. Pictures of David with his family sat neatly on his desk, next to a row of golden trophies and awards from business organizations. Every part of the room seemed meant to show importance, success, and distance from the world below. Maria stood just inside the doorway, careful not to brush against anything. She took it all in, not with envy, but with the steady eyes of someone who was used to seeing the world from the outside. She noticed little things too, the way the chairs were arranged, the hum of the air conditioner, how the glass windows caught the morning sun. David offered her a seat across from his own, then sat down, folding his hands and dropping his usual formal words. "Please, Maria, just be honest with me," he said. "How did you come to speak 9 languages and end up working here? I'd like to understand your story. Start wherever you want." Maria took a breath, searching for words that wouldn't sound either too dramatic or self-pitying. "There's not much mystery," she said quietly. "I didn't plan my life to end up in this job forever. I went to college for a while, but things changed when my mother got sick. She needed help, so I left school to take care of her." Maria paused and glanced at the floor, then continued. "After she passed, it was just me and my daughter. My ex-husband didn't stick around. I needed work that paid the bills and let me take care of her, so I took whatever I could find. Here at night, I could pick up extra hours. It wasn't a big plan, just what had to be done." She shrugged, her words carrying no sense of bitterness, just facts. "I learned languages as a kid, moving around from country to country. It stuck with me. I never used them much in my work until, well, days like today. My life's been more about making things work than aiming big." David listened with new respect, realizing this wasn't a story of missed chances, but one of quiet strength and steady resolve. Maria was not there because she had been overlooked. She was there because she had chosen, time and again, to do what she had to survive and care for her family. That room, filled with its symbols of achievement, suddenly felt a little smaller in the presence of someone who had weathered so much without ever making it about herself. Despite the heavy routines and all the responsibility she'd carried, Maria never let her love for languages fade. After finishing her shifts at Lincoln Enterprises, she would end her days by picking up books at the library, German novels, Italian news magazines, whatever she could find, or listening to radio, programs online in Russian or Mandarin, keeping up with accents and phrases that she worried might slip away without regular practice. Even when her legs ached and her eyes felt heavy, she gave herself the small thrill of hearing or reading something new from another part of the world. To her, keeping those languages alive was more than a hobby. It was a reminder that she was more than her day job, more than the anonymous figure pushing a mop. That habit, learning for its own sake, was proof to herself that her life still held meaning beyond just surviving. Across the desk, David realized just how much discipline it must have taken to keep up that passion with so many other pressures. He imagined her, night after night, in a quiet apartment with the hum of the city outside, turning pages or repeating phrases to herself while her daughter slept. He could see now that Maria's knowledge came wrapped in something even rarer, steady persistence, a stubborn refusal to let her intellect slip away in the face of everyday demands. it began to dawn on him that his old view of talent, neat boxes, official titles, spotless resumes, had kept him from seeing what was right in front of him. In all the years he'd overseen Lincoln Enterprises, David had walked past countless people with hidden strengths, never thinking to look beyond the surface. In that quiet office filled with tokens of his corporate success, he felt something new, humility, mixed with regret. It was uncomfortable, but for once he let the feeling sink in instead of pushing it aside. He wondered about all the other men and women whose abilities had been hidden by uniforms, accents, or the timing of their shifts. Maria, sitting there, calmly but with such depth, made him realize how narrow and incomplete his old ways of judging value really were. For the first time, David felt determined to not let this chance at understanding slip by him, as so many others had before. That afternoon, something shifted in David. He left the executive office, telling his assistant not to hold his calls, and made his way down through the maze of elevators and service hallways to reach the basement level of Lincoln Enterprises' main building. He realized he'd hardly ever set foot down there, except maybe once during a power outage. The corridors felt colder, less polished, with their concrete floors and fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. It was a side of the company he'd never bothered to really see, a world far from where boardroom discussions and charts dominated the air. David wandered around for a few minutes, passing storage rooms stacked with cardboard boxes and shelves, crowded with all the cleaning supplies it took to keep such a huge office building running every day. The smell of lemon-scented disinfectant was strong, and a faint sound of a radio playing some oldies drifted down the hallway. He finally spotted Maria, carefully restocking bottles and refilling her cart with towels. She looked surprised to see him there in his suit, like a fish out of water among the mops and buckets. Instead of the usual small talk, David got right to his point. "Maria, something's come up. We have an important meeting in about half an hour with a group of clients from Germany. Our official translator just cancelled. She's stuck at the airport. Could you stand in and help us with interpretation?" He searched her face, hoping he wasn't overstepping. Maria's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she didn't hesitate. She nodded her head, wiped her hands, and said, "No problem, I'll be ready." To her, language was just another switch, to flip, another tool to pull from the shelf. As they rode the elevator back to the upper floors, David couldn't help but feel the energy shifting inside him. Inviting Maria into the conference room, an action that seemed so minor, felt like opening a door that had always been there but never unlocked. And from the way Maria moved, calm but focused, it was clear that she was ready for whatever lay ahead. In that moment, the quiet power of possibility crept in, breaking down the walls built by years of assumptions and showing both of them that sometimes change begins in the least expected places. Inside the boardroom, Maria stepped in, with David, her posture steady despite the suddenness of her new role. Around the long table, a group of German executives waited, their faces polite but a little tense. The air was thick with the usual stiffness that came from language barriers and the uncertainty of important negotiations. David introduced Maria as their interpreter for the meeting, and for a brief second there was a flicker of surprise among the executives. Nobody had expected this woman from the cleaning staff to take center stage. Maria wasted no time. Once the introductions were finished, she moved seamlessly between English and German, her words clear and confident. She not only kept pace with the technical talks about logistics and supply chains, but also caught the jokes tucked between formal lines, translating them so everyone could laugh. As she translated a clever remark about American weather and German punctuality, the room erupted in shared laughter, the first real sign of comfort the group had shown since they walked in. With each exchange, Maria picked up on nuances too. Tone, body language, little gestures that spoke almost as loudly as words. She bridged awkward silences, made sure nothing was lost in translation, and gently guided the room back on track whenever discussions drifted. Her presence seemed to dissolve the invisible wall dividing the two sides of the table. Where before there had been cautious glances and nervous shifting, now people leaned in, traded stories, and relaxed into the conversation. David sat back and just watched, both amazed and a bit humbled. Until then, he had always thought a great meeting was about controlling the agenda or making the right pitch at the right time. But now, he could see something deeper happening. Maria brought out honesty and goodwill simply by being fully present, by letting both groups feel seen and understood. The mood in the room warmed, shifting away from guarded business talk to something close to trust. It dawned on him that real communication was so much more than words. Maria made it look easy, but he realized it took empathy, patience, and a willingness to care about what others were really trying to say. David found himself feeling proud, but also quietly puzzled by how he had missed such potential right inside his own company. In that conference room, the ordinary lines between people faded as Maria showed everyone, without ever meaning to, what real leadership could look like. After the meeting wrapped up with firm handshakes and a few grateful words from the visiting executives, David still had questions lingering in his mind. He wondered whether Maria's performance had been a lucky coincidence, the sort of thing that happened once when the stars lined up, or if what he had witnessed was a steady quality that ran deep. Determined to know more, he pulled Maria aside for a quiet word as the others drifted out of the boardroom. He asked her if she had ever had formal training in translation, maybe attended special courses at some language school, or earned a professional certificate. Maria only shook her head gently, her smile a bit tired but sincere. "No certificates, Mr. Graham," she said. "I never had the chance for that. After my mom got sick, I left school for good. My only degrees are from life, raising my daughter, working long nights, picking up books when I could, listening to foreign radio after my shift. Sometimes you just learn what you have to so your family can get through." She spoke without resentment, simply sharing the facts of her path. David let that settle in. In that moment, any doubts faded. It was obvious Maria's skills were real, built from grit and long practice, not luck or quick study. For the first time, as their eyes met, there was an unspoken understanding of how much could be hidden beneath the surface of someone's resume or uniform. What Maria had achieved was not the result of privilege or access, but of perseverance through quiet hurdles over many years. Their conversation wound down almost shyly. Two people who had rarely shared anything beyond a polite greeting now, finding common ground in mutual respect. They traded small smiles, not needing many words to say what was on their minds. Maria felt no different from usual, just quietly glad that she had helped and maybe shown something of herself along the way. She returned to her cleaning cart, ready to finish out her shift as always. David, on the other hand, found himself strangely restless. He lingered by the window, looking out over the city, thinking about what talents might be slipping by unnoticed in his own company every single day. There was something precious in the ordinary that he could no longer ignore, a feeling that would stay with him much longer than he expected. The next morning, Maria arrived at Lincoln Enterprises as she always did, slipping her security badge over her shirt and clocking in while the city was still waking up. She expected nothing out of the ordinary, just another day of blending into the background, moving silently through the quiet halls with her cleaning cart. But as she was readying her supplies, her work phone buzzed. It was a call from the executive office. The message was clear. They needed her to come upstairs right away. She hesitated for a moment, uncertain whether this invitation meant trouble or something else entirely. Still, curiosity won out over worry, and Maria left her cart neatly by the supply room, wiping her hands on her jeans before heading for the elevators. The air felt different as soon as she pressed the button for the top floor. This time, Maria noticed people noticing her. Staff from the front desk glanced up, exchanging whispers when they saw her pass in her worn sneakers and cardigan. Some tried not to stare, but others didn't bother to hide their surprise. Even in the elevator, a couple of employees looked at her, then at each other, quietly speculating. It was clear that word of yesterday's meeting had traveled faster than she could have imagined. As she walked through the executive halls, Maria could almost feel the shift on her skin. The same faces who barely registered her presence before were now drawn to her, craning their necks or murmuring to their friends. Each step made her more aware of her own clothes, her accent, even the way she moved through the fancy lobby with its polished floors and shining lights. The feeling was strange, almost uncomfortable, like stepping into a room meant for someone else. Doors that had always seemed off-limits slid open ahead of her. Maria realized she was now the center of conversation, her name echoing softly in places where only yesterday she had been invisible. It was unsettling to be thrust into the spotlight after so many years of sidestepping it. A mix of pride, confusion, and nervousness tangled inside her as she reached the reception outside David's office. For the first time, Maria wondered just how much her world might change now that the invisible had become impossible to ignore. Maria stepped into David's office, her heart beating a little faster. The sun poured through the big glass windows, casting wide patches of light across the floor. David stood up from behind his desk, gesturing for her to sit. There was a seriousness in his face, but it wasn't unfriendly. He offered her some water, trying to put her at ease, but Maria still couldn't shake the tension from her shoulders. David got right to the point. He shared with Maria an idea he had been turning over since their last conversation. A proposal, as he called it, not a favor. He wanted to create a new role for her at Lincoln Enterprises, a position that would recognize and use her language skills and deep understanding of different cultures. She would act as the company's international cultural liaison, building bridges between offices in the United States and teams overseas. David was clear. This isn't charity. It's not about helping you out. It's about fixing something that has been wrong here for a long time. We've been blind to the abilities right in front of us. It's time to change that. At first, Maria struggled to believe what she was hearing. Too many times, she had learned to be wary of nice gestures, to expect strings attached or promises that faded after a few days. She eyed David, half expecting him to backpedal or reveal some hidden motive. "Why now?" she asked quietly. "People have worked hard here for years and not been noticed. Why me? And why this sudden change?" There was a small tremble in her voice, part hope, part suspicion. David looked her square in the eyes. He admitted there were no easy answers. He had spent too many years only seeing what he wanted to see, rewarding the loudest voices and the flashiest resumes. "I realized yesterday that we've missed out on so much by not recognizing what people actually bring to the table," he said. "I want to make this right. Starting with you but not ending with you. We need to do better as a company and as people. Will you help lead that?" The conversation hung in the air, quiet but honest. Maria slowly let the possibility sink in, wondering if maybe, just maybe, this was the real beginning of something new, not just for her, but for everyone who had ever gone unnoticed in the halls of that big building. The room grew quiet as Maria tried to process everything. Accepting the new role was not as simple as saying yes. She stared at her hands, feeling old doubts rise up. They were the kind built from years of being overlooked. She had never worked in an office before. The closest she had ever come was pushing her cleaning cart past the rows of desks after hours. She worried about small things, like not owning the right kind of clothes, or not knowing how to use all the fancy programs that flashed on computer screens she barely understood. Her voice wavered as she confessed these worries to David, almost embarrassed by them. David listened and, without missing a beat, started offering real solutions instead of just encouragement. "We'll get you anything you need, Maria," he said softly. "New clothes, training, however long it takes. We want you here, genuinely, and I will make sure you have all the tools and support to succeed. No one expects you to know everything on day one." He paused, then added, "And if there's something that needs fixing, we'll fix it together." The way he spoke, it felt clear that he meant it, not just as her boss, but as someone who truly respected her. She looked up at him, searching for any sign that this was a PR move or just for show. The very idea of being used as a symbol, held up so the company could look progressive, made her uneasy. She'd seen it before. People getting promoted so the company could check a box, and nothing would really change. Maria asked straight out, "Why now? Why me? And who will take care of what I leave behind?" There was both fear and care in her voice. She cared about her cleaning team, worried that her absence would only make their jobs harder. David answered honestly, "Nobody can really replace you, Maria. Not in the work you do now, and not in this new role either. But this position isn't just a gesture. It's overdue, real recognition. I promise you, we're looking at long-term change, and part of that is listening to people like you instead of just giving you a new badge. We'll make sure the cleaning team is taken care of too." Maria let those words sink in. It was not just about her, but about starting something larger. She was beginning to see, slowly and carefully, that maybe, for the first time, her presence truly mattered. News of Maria's promotion spread quickly through the halls and break rooms of Lincoln Enterprises. It seemed like within a few hours, everyone was talking about her new role. Some congratulated her openly, stopping her by the elevators to offer a smile and a handshake, but not everyone was so welcoming. Several employees whispered in corners, guessing at hidden reasons behind her new position. Some even suggested Maria had some kind of secret professional background or powerful friend pulling strings, unable to believe that someone from housekeeping could be given such an important job based on merit alone. The rumors didn't stop there. Others grumbled that Maria was picked just to make the company look good, viewing her promotion as a way for management to show off how modern and inclusive they were trying to be. A few were openly jealous, muttering that it was unfair she got such a big chance when they had spent years climbing the usual ladders with barely a nod from HR. Maria caught pieces of these conversations in the cafeteria and near the coffee machine. She did her best to walk past without showing how much it stung, but the doubts planted by other people seemed to follow her everywhere. Where once she could disappear into the crowd, now eyes seemed to track her every move. During meetings, some colleagues listened with interest, but others looked for reasons to dismiss her ideas, challenging her suggestions even when she backed them up with careful research and personal insight. It was exhausting, this new glare of attention, having to prove over and over that she belonged here and that her success was not just luck or charity. Maria felt the weight of all the expectations, both fair and unfair, and the pressure sometimes made her wish she could slip back into the quiet comfort of her old routines. And yet, for all the complications and discomfort, something else was rising inside her. Maria saw the challenge for what it was, a chance to stand up for herself and to make it easier for the next person who came after her. The skepticism and the whispers did not crush her. If anything, they pushed her to bring her whole self to work, to show everyone that her years of hard work and resilience had value. This moment, rough as it felt, was kind of a test, and Maria knew she had spent her whole life preparing to meet it. In her newly assigned office, which was really just a small room with basic furniture and a window overlooking the busy city streets, Maria sat quietly for a moment before unpacking her things. She didn't have much to fill the space: a second-hand laptop the IT department had set up for her, and a family photo she'd carried for years. One thing she did make sure to keep, though, was her old cleaning uniform. She hung it at the back of a modest cabinet, not as a mark of shame, but as a reminder of where she had started and how far she had come. It was not about clinging to the past or dwelling on hard times. Maria saw it as a symbol of resilience, something to look at on difficult days and remember the strength it took to get here. Getting used to office routines took patience. Everything was different from what she had known. Instead of pushing her cart from floor to floor, she now responded to endless emails, kept track of meetings, and learned to join video calls with colleagues from cities she had only ever seen on maps. Those first few days, she often felt like a visitor, trying to figure out unspoken rules and hidden expectations. But Maria reminded herself that nobody expected her to learn everything overnight, and she allowed herself a little grace. Her first real test came early, a meeting with Greg Thompson, the head of international operations. Greg was the kind of manager who wore his suit like armor and chose his words carefully. Maria could sense he was not entirely convinced about her new role. The air in his office was polite, but underneath she felt the push and pull of skepticism. Greg shifted papers on his desk and peppered her with questions about her background, her experience, and what exactly she could offer to the company's complex global projects. Maria answered as simply and honestly as she could. She did not boast, but made sure to share her track record, helping teams overcome misunderstandings between locations, thanks to her language skills and calm approach. When Greg slid a stack of overdue project notes across the table, documents the last liaison had given up on, thick with international legal terms, Maria didn't flinch. She promised to review them and give feedback by the end of the week. There was no drama, just a clear acceptance of the challenge ahead. Greg nodded, not smiling but looking slightly less doubtful. Maria knew she had a long climb ahead, but she was ready to prove herself step by step. Maria soon found herself back in David's office for one of their weekly check-ins, a handful of notes in her lap, and anxiety simmering under her calm exterior. She gathered her thoughts, finally voicing something she'd been wrestling with ever since her new job began. "David, I have to be honest. Every day I walk into this building, I feel out of place. It's all new. How people talk, how they move in groups. I'm not sure what I'm doing half the time, and it feels like everyone else already knows the secret handshake. I keep thinking they're going to realize I don't belong here." David listened, nodding without judgment. When she finished, he leaned back a little and gave her a small, understanding smile. "Maria, feeling nervous doesn't mean you're not good enough. If anything, it means you care about getting it right. Believe it or not, I've felt exactly the way you do. It was years ago, early in my career. I had the right education, but none of the connections. At meetings, people talked around me, barely noticed I was there. For a long time, I felt unseen, even when I was surrounded by people who looked just like me." She looked at him, surprised. It was hard to picture the CEO, always so confident, feeling invisible in the same way she had. He shrugged, as if reading her mind. "It's easy to think everyone else is born with the answers. I promise you, most are just better at pretending. What matters is what you bring to the table. You're here for a reason. Not as a symbol, not as somebody's good deed, but because you see things most people miss." For the first time, Maria felt something shift inside her. Maybe not quite comfort, but a spark of trust. It made a difference to know her boss didn't just hand down orders from above. He had walked his own winding road too. Their conversation became quieter, more relaxed. She shared a story about her first days with the cleaning team, how she had gotten lost on her way to the loading dock and nobody noticed for nearly an hour. David laughed, telling her about a similar moment in his own past. They didn't talk about titles or business for the rest of the meeting. They just talked like two people who understood what it was like to be outsiders, and suddenly Maria realized she was starting to feel like she belonged. Over the next few weeks, Maria threw herself into her work, determined to prove that she belonged in her new role, no matter what anyone whispered in the break room. Lincoln Enterprises was still a place of mixed feelings when it came to her promotion. Some people rooted for her, while others grumbled about how things were changing too quickly or not in the right way. Maria decided early on that she could not control other people's opinions, but she could control how well she did her job. She focused on her responsibilities, especially when it came to working with international clients. In one of her first big meetings, Maria listened as a team from Germany discussed a complicated contract over a video call. When a point of confusion threatened to derail the discussion, she gently stepped in, translating both the language and the business culture in a way that made everyone feel understood. She explained tricky terms, cleared up what each side expected, and caught small details that might have led to expensive misunderstandings. The clients looked surprised, in a good way, that someone at Lincoln actually made an effort to understand more than just the paperwork. Word of her skill began to spread. Her meetings ran smoother, and her colleagues noticed that international deals went forward with fewer headaches, less stress, and far better results. Maria never bragged or called attention to her successes. Instead, she stayed practical, focusing on what needed to get done and making sure nobody was left out of the process. Her steady approach, never showy or demanding, was refreshing in a room used to loud voices and big egos. Leaders who had doubted her at first stopped raising objections during discussions. With each successful project, the signs of resistance began to fade. People who once saw her as a temporary experiment started seeing the real value she brought, even if they were reluctant to admit it out loud. Maria noticed that requests for her help were no longer whispered or sent through her manager. They came directly to her, with respect in people's eyes and a willingness to listen. As her impact grew, Maria stayed grounded. She kept her old uniform in the office cabinet and remembered her roots. She told herself that respect was something you had to earn every day, not just prove once. Slowly, her name started being linked to excellence at Lincoln Enterprises, not because it was forced, but because each day she made it real. One quiet afternoon, something changed at Lincoln Enterprises that Maria never saw coming. She was heading to a meeting when she caught sight of a small crowd gathered outside the company's main training room. There was no announcement, no balloons, no grand speeches. Just a few people from facilities standing by a new plaque beside the door. Maria slowed, curious, and when she got close enough, she read her own name on the metal plate. Maria Hernandez Training Center. Her heart skipped a beat. She had walked past this room almost every day during her years as a cleaner, never imagining one day it would bear her name. The fact that the company chose not to make a big show out of it made the gesture feel honest. It was different from those moments when businesses post about diversity for likes online. This was something quieter, but a lot more meaningful. The simple plaque sent a message to everyone. Here, what mattered most was your effort, not your position or the clothes you wore. Nobody had to say it out loud. The sign was there for anyone to see. After the new name went up, something interesting started to happen. People who worked at Lincoln, especially the new interns and younger staff, started asking about Maria. They wanted to know how someone who started in such a basic role ended up becoming the person whose name was on the place where every employee learned the ropes. Some came right up to Maria herself, curious but respectful, asking about her journey and wanting to hear her advice. It was clear that the training center had become more than just a space for meetings or new hire presentations. The room itself was now a kind of symbol. It turned into a place where you could see right in front of you that the old barriers the company once had were starting to break down. Doors that had been out of reach for people like Maria were now open, and it encouraged others to imagine possibilities for themselves that they might never have thought about before. Maria found herself rooting for every person who came into that room, whether they were just starting out or switching careers later in life. The subtle change in the air told her that her story was slowly becoming part of the company's story, a sign that real change was not only possible, but finally happening. With cut to me, her name now quietly displayed on the training center, Maria started noticing small but meaningful changes in her everyday routine. On her desk or slipped under her office door, she sometimes found handwritten notes without a signature. Some were simple, just lines like "Thanks for making things possible" or "You give me hope." Others shared personal stories from people who had spent years at Lincoln feeling overlooked, only to find inspiration in Maria's journey. These private thank yous weren't public praise, but together they showed her that her progress was not just hers alone. People across the company, especially those who usually blended into the background, now had someone to look to and think, "Why not me?" She even started receiving emails from folks who worked in different departments, some of whom she had never met before. They wanted advice or just wished her luck. For the first time, Maria understood her promotion had cracked open possibilities. For a lot of people who had been waiting for a sign that hard work could pay off, that being noticed was not out of reach. Of course, not everything was changing smoothly. One Thursday morning, she was invited to a meeting with Helen Carter, a long-standing member of Lincoln's board of directors. Maria had heard about Helen, her sharp questions, her reputation for controlling every detail, and her skepticism toward anything out of the ordinary. The meeting was stiff from the start. Helen's questions cut straight to the point. Why should someone without a top degree or decades of formal experience have such influence? Did Maria really have what it took to guide big projects and affect the organization's direction? The questions stung, but Maria did not back down. Keeping her voice steady, she said, "I understand where your doubts come from. I may not have an Ivy League diploma to hang on the wall, and I know my story does not follow the usual path. What does matter, though, are the results the team and I are delivering. If you look at the changes in international partnerships, the smoother workflows, and how people across the company are stepping up, I think my work speaks for itself more than any certificate could." The room got quiet for a moment after she finished. Helen did not say much, at least not right away. But Maria could tell she had been heard. The experience was tough, yet Maria left the room feeling even more certain that what really counted was what she did, not just what she had on paper. After that tough conversation with Helen, Maria felt the weight of it linger on her shoulders. She needed a break before heading back to the rush of meetings and emails, so she took her phone from her bag and stepped outside, searching for a quiet spot along the sidewalk. There, beneath the wide branches of a city tree, she dialed her daughter Emily. Emily answered right away, her voice cheerful as always, talking about her latest school project and complaining a little about the cafeteria food. For a few minutes, Maria let herself get wrapped up in those small, easy details of their life, whether they needed to buy milk on the way home, which teacher had given too much homework, and even which family movie they would choose for Friday night. Listening to her daughter chatter, Maria felt her muscles relax bit by bit, the stress of the boardroom discussion falling away. It reminded her of what mattered most, the simple strength she found in her family and the everyday happiness they shared. When Maria hung up the phone, she was smiling again, her resolve steadier than before. There was something powerful in the thought that no matter how many doubts or challenges she faced at work, she always had a place where she belonged. It was not her job title or a fancy office that made her whole. It was the messy, honest love that waited for her at home. Feeling lighter, she walked back through the front doors of Lincoln Enterprises with her head held high. Maria tackled her next set of tasks with a calm focus, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. She answered questions, coached a new hire through a confusing procedure, and even took on an extra project that needed someone reliable to keep it moving forward. Little things started to change around her. One colleague would bring her a coffee without saying much, just a nod and a quick smile. Another paused by her desk to drop off a helpful tip about a client's preferences. Even the folks who still seemed unsure watched her with something close, to respect now, as if waiting to see what Maria would do next. These moments were small, just gestures or kind words here and there, but together they signaled something deeper. People at Lincoln Enterprises were beginning to understand that change, real change, was more about the way people treated each other than whatever was written on an organizational chart. And Maria, quietly and steadily, was at the heart of that shift. As the months passed at Lincoln Enterprises, it became clear that Maria's story was more than just a one-off success. The quiet shift she had started began to ripple out far beyond her own department. People from marketing, logistics, and even finance found their way to her office, sometimes knocking, sometimes just poking their head in, eager to talk. Some came for advice about problems at work, trouble with a manager, or how to juggle their ambitions with the realities of life outside the office. Others needed a bit of encouragement, something simple like, "You're doing better than you think." Maria always made time, no matter how busy her schedule got. What surprised her most was how often someone would say, "I've never had the chance to tell my side of things until now." Maria realized her office had become a kind of safe space. It was not about her title, and definitely not just about her knack for languages or reading between the lines in tough negotiations. It was the way she listened, without judgment, making folks feel like their voices actually mattered. For the first time, cleaners, maintenance workers, and entry-level staff started to believe that their opinions counted too. Maria remembered working with David, the CEO, to build out an internal development program. They set it up so anyone, no matter their starting position, could access training and mentorship. She saw interns working side by side with managers, learning new skills and teaching them in return. Before, a promotion story like Maria's had felt impossible. Now it was just unusual, and others were already following similar paths. When the annual conference rolled around, Maria found herself standing on stage with all eyes on her. The theme that year was Building Tomorrow Together, but Maria decided to keep her speech simple. She took a breath, looked out at the crowd, and said, "Never assume you know someone's value because of their uniform or their job title. I almost walked right past my own worth, and I know I'm not alone in that. Listen to the people you usually overlook. There's more in this company than what meets the eye." As people applauded, Maria could see her message landing. Some hopeful, some thoughtful, a few even wiping away tears. Her journey had grown into something much bigger. She was proof that you could make a real difference, and she left everyone in that room considering who else deserved a chance to shine.